detail. So what I'm doing is I'm going to look up the exact words of the Nagarjuna quotation. Okay? Okay? Alright. So, Nagarjuna says, by a misperception of emptiness, a person of little intelligence is destroyed, like a snake incorrectly seized, or like a spell incorrectly cast. Okay? Does that help? So, as we were talking about last night, the two ways to incorrectly perceive any phenomena is by reifying it or by deprecating it. Reifying it is assigning a mode of existence to it that is above and beyond what is actually there. And most of the time when we talk about that, it is then grasping that phenomena to be truly existent. Okay? Deprecation is the other side, where that wouldn't exist. Okay? But in this context, in Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, he's already talking about the presentation of the two truths. Okay? So, the reasoning consciousness that is analyzing the ultimate, okay? You take an object and you analyze whether it's truly existent or not. If that object is truly existent, it would be found upon analysis. At the end of analysis, the not finding of the object is the proof that it doesn't exist truly. Okay? Alright. But then there's a debate or doubt that kind of comes up, because at the end of the analysis of the lid, one doesn't find the lid. The not finding of the lid is in one way, right, the realization of the emptiness of the lid. Okay? But then, some might then say, oh, but the emptiness of the lid is found at the end of the analysis. Therefore, the emptiness of the lid is truly existent. Thank you for shaking your head. You guys understand? We have a reasoning consciousness, we call it a reasoning consciousness analyzing the ultimate. Okay? What that means is, we take a phenomena and analyze whether it is truly existent or not. If, at the end of the analysis, okay, if we're analyzing the lid, at the end of the analysis, if we find the lid, we will find the true existence, a truly existent lid. Right? We don't. We don't find that. But if we do find it, that would mean that the lid is truly existent. Since we don't find it, we can validly conclude that the lid is not truly existent. Okay? Reasoning consciousness analyzing the ultimate means if something were ultimately existent, it would be findable under that type of analysis. Okay? So the lid is not findable. But the mere non-findability of the lid in that type of analysis shows that the lid lacks true existence. we have realized the emptiness of the lid, then the doubt can come up, oh, well, that emptiness of the lid is found at the end of the reason and consciousness analyzing the ultimate, so that is the ultimate. That is truly existent. Yes? Okay? So, that is the type of doubt that Nagarjuna is talking about in this context. How would the emptiness be misperceived? You would misperceive it by thinking, since emptiness is found or realized at the end of reason and consciousness analyzing the ultimate, then it has to be ultimately existent. So, we have to then be clear. The reason and conscious analyzing the lid does not find the lid. What does it find? The emptiness of the lid. The non-true existence of the lid. So, but for us to then say, emptiness is found by the reason and consciousness analyzing ultimate, is that fair to say? No. Because if we were to use emptiness as the base that we're trying to analyze, we don't find emptiness, we find the emptiness of emptiness. Therefore, emptiness is not truly existent. But someone with, little intelligence, okay, if they then, confuse this and say, well, emptiness is truly existent, they would be destroyed. Why? Because, as we said last night, if emptiness is truly existent, then actually emptiness doesn't exist, full stop. Why is that? Because what emptiness means is the lack of true existence. So if we say the lack of true existence is truly existent, then there's no such thing as a lack of true existence. So then, emptiness itself would then not exist. If emptiness doesn't exist, well, then as we were saying last night, those for whom emptiness is feasible, everything is feasible. Those for whom emptiness is not feasible, nothing is feasible. Alright. Remember last night I was saying, I'm not sure if this statement is in the Mula Madhyamika or the Ratnavali. Yes? Huh. So there's actually similar sentences in both. Okay? So, in the Mula Madhyamika it says, by misperception of emptiness, a person of little intelligence is destroyed like a snake incorrectly seized or a spell incorrectly cast. In the Ratnavali it says, if this phenomena, meaning emptiness, is misperceived, the unwise are thereby ruined. Thus, through this nihilistic view, they will sink into corruption. Okay? So, see, through this nihilistic view. Isn't that interesting? I don't think you guys understand. How is viewing emptiness as being truly existent, is that a view of nihilism or eternalism?
Eternalism. According to Acharya Nagarjuna, it's nihilism.
According to Nagarjuna, it's nihilism, but according to you, it's what?
No, it's
eternalism.
It could be in some ways.
That I'll have to remember. Well, Nagarjuna says it like that, but I disagree with Nagarjuna. Well, that's what I was saying. In general, viewing something as being truly existent is a view of reification, whereas viewing something as being non-existent is a view of nihilism. But in this case, viewing emptiness as being truly existent is a view of nihilism. Because if emptiness is truly existent, emptiness will not exist. And therefore it becomes a view of nihilism. Okay? Tsongkhapa also talks about that in some detail in the beginning of the Ocean of Reasoning, his commentary on Nirvana. Which, have you started reading it, boss?
I've got the book, but I haven't started reading it yet. I've ordered it and got it at home. It was a homework for master's class, but I didn't get down to it.
I appreciate your honesty. Okay? Okay? So, Sebastian, crystal clear? Clear as mud?
There's some clarity, but no, I understand what you're saying, that if you're using so much of philosophy,
which I will
but I was
Anyway. Okay, let's just make it very, very basic. Okay? Does anything exist truly? Does anything exist inherently? No. No, right? No. Nothing exists inherently. Okay? So, if something doesn't exist at all, there's no way it can exist inherently. That's not even a conversation, right? Right? Something has to exist. If something exists, then we can ask, oh, does it exist inherently, or does it exist, independently, or as a dependent arising, Then we have the question, right? Yes? Yes, right? Okay, so look, I don't have any children, okay? So then to say, what color are my son's eyes, doesn't make any sense. I don't have a son. We have to first have a son, then we can ask what color are his eyes, right? Okay. So in a similar way, we have to have an existent phenomena to discuss how it's existent, right? Okay. Yes? So then, nothing exists inherently. If it doesn't exist at all, it doesn't exist inherently. If it exists, it doesn't exist inherently. Right? Okay. So now, emptiness, does it exist or not? Emptiness itself.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, emptiness exists. Since it exists, it doesn't exist inherently. Okay? So, in general, when we have that kind of wrong view, right, of any phenomena, it's a problem. Right? Nothing exists inherently, so any thought that we have that something exists inherently is wrong. But here Nagarjuna is paying special attention to those for whom it's a risk, it's a danger that they would consider emptiness itself to be inherently existent. Right? In other contexts he says, all phenomena lack inherent existence. Here he's singling out the view of emptiness being inherently existent as problematic. Why? Because that would then, it kind of becomes a view of nihilism. Why? Because emptiness, if it means lack of inherent existence, then to say the lack of inherent existence is inherently existent would then kind of have the logical consequence that emptiness itself would not exist. Therefore, it becomes a view of nihilism. Okay, so we're going to get to the text. Okay? Does everyone understand what I've just said? Okay. So, where are we? I think it's page 14. With respect to the... What?
Last paragraph.
With respect to the mode of meditation on the path of seeing, it says in the instructions of a teacher set down by Lekpe Sherab of Ngok, having addressed Shariputra. Okay, you see? So we spent, last night talking about the preceding paragraph. We're moving on. Okay? Those are the modes, those are the way to meditate on emptiness on the occasions of the path of accumulation and preparation. So I also went over the 5 paths because I knew that was coming today. Okay? So, basically this Heart Sutra, then the further commentators are then dividing or distinguishing certain sections of it as being showing or teaching how one meditates on emptiness on the various paths. Okay? So now, with respect to the mode of meditation on the path of seeing, it says in the instructions of a teacher set down by Lekpe Sherab of Ngok that, having addressed Shariputra, thus all phenomena are empty, indicates the door of liberation, emptiness. Without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not stainless, indicates the door of signlessness, and undiminished, unfulfilled, indicate the door of wishlessness. So here, the three doors of liberation, emptiness, signlessness, and wishlessness, you guys have heard about before. Yes? Okay. So, in general, emptiness means the lack of inherent existence. Okay? And, Ooh. The door of signlessness. Okay, let me just double check. What I think it means is, from a truly existent cause doesn't arise a truly existent effect. And the other is from a truly existent effect. A truly existent effect doesn't arise from a truly existent cause. But let me just double check, okay? Okay, I'm gonna just take this from one of my own guru's commentaries on this, okay? The causal characteristics responsible for a thing's production, there are causal characteristics responsible for a thing's production, and there are other characteristics which define a thing and allow us to posit it. These various characteristics exist, but not from their own side. Thus it says, things have no defining characteristics. that's true. Yeah? Wait a minute. Okay. So the door of signlessness is this absence of any truly existent signs or characteristics. Okay? So for example, fire is hot and burning, right? That is the nature of fire. But fire's nature, although it is hot and burning, is not inherently hot and burning. Okay? And then the third is what I was referring to, that wishlessness, that the effects that do arise from causes do not do so in an inherent manner. Okay? So that is wishlessness, which is the third so-called door to liberation. Now, there is one statement in Aryadeva's 400 stanzas that says there's only one door to liberation, emptiness. And here they talk about three doors. But actually the three doors of liberation are all types of emptiness, right? They're like the general and the specific instances. So it's not contradictory to what Aryadeva says. Okay? So Mahajana's commentary says that emptiness and without characteristics are respectively the objects of observation of the doctrinal knowledge and subsequent knowledge with respect to suffering. Similarly, unproduced and unceased are the objects of observation of the doctrinal knowledges of and subsequent knowledges with respect to sources. Stainless and not stainless are the objects of observation of the doctrinal knowledge and subsequent knowledge of the path, and undiminished and unfulfilled are explained to be the objects of observation of the doctrinal knowledge and subsequent knowledge of cessation. Okay, so here Tendala Rampa is stating the view of this other Indian commentator, Mahajana. So remember, this is the explanation of how emptiness is realized on the path of seeing. Okay? So, again, you guys haven't studied the grounds and paths, but the path of seeing is divided into 16 moments. Okay? And those 16 moments are further divided by there's the doctrinal knowledge and subsequent knowledge. Yeah, Choe, She, and Je, She. Choe being Dharma. Yeah, Dharma, Jnana, and subsequent knowledge. Okay, so again, there's quite some debate about this. But in certain systems, and those relate to the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so we have the 16 moments of the Four Noble Truths. We have the true suffering, right? True cause, true cessation, and true path, then are further divided into the the doctrinal knowledge of true suffering, and then the subsequent knowledge of true suffering. Okay, they alternate like that. There are other presentations, and I think the Madhyamika presentation would be that all of the doctrinal knowledges arise at one time. And then all the subsequent knowledges arise at one time. Okay? So here, Tenzin Namjong is saying that Mahajana's commentary says like that, is a way to distance him from saying like, I believe that. Okay? Yeah. So, the other thing that's probably okay to note at this point, see, what does it mean for something to be the object of observation of the path of seeing? It means the object that is realized by the path of seeing. Do you guys understand what the path of seeing is? It's a mind, right? Path, it's not like we walk down the street, right? It's a mind that directly realizes emptiness, okay? So we have the uninterrupted path of seeing and the, Namjong. How do they, path of release, okay? Where the path of uninterrupted path of seeing and the path of release, okay? So, to say then that, unproduced and unceased are the objects of observation of doctrinal knowledge and subsequent knowledge with respect to sources, okay? Then we're saying that the path of seeing then is realizing different things in its different moments. And what do we think about that? We don't think about it. So that's difficult. It's difficult to assert that. Because in general, the path of seeing, what does it realize? Emptiness. Emptiness directly, right? It realizes emptiness directly. And so you could see that as just being, whatever you're meditating on, what comes before the path of seeing? Path of preparation. So at the last moment of the path of preparation, right, through the path of uninterrupted path of seeing and the path of release of the path of seeing, right, that's one meditative equipoise. The last moment is still a conceptual mind. You're meditating on emptiness. And then it switches into a direct realization. You have the uninterrupted path of seeing, and then the uninterrupted path of seeing is a direct antidote to the intellectually acquired ignorance. And then the path of release is when one has abandoned the intellectually acquired. What?
What he said, one abandons?
Abandon the intellectually acquired ignorance. You understand? That's all in one meditative equipoise. So if on the last moment of the path of preparation, you are meditating on, let's say, the emptiness of the self, okay? Then to say that these, one switches objects of observation within the context of one meditative equipoise, a little bit difficult. A little bit difficult. Okay. So anyway, to get into this fully, one will need to have, you need to study the grounds and path literature, right? Ranakar was asking me about it yesterday. But, okay. That's not in the curriculum, right? Grounds and paths?
I think it is there.
In what?
Basic program.
Some editions say, therefore all phenomena are emptiness and stainless and free from stain. And there are those who comment on it in that way. But in many Indian and Tibetan commentaries it says in that way all phenomena and not stainless. It is clear that it is more meaningful if it is explained in accordance with the two negative terms appearing in succession. Okay? So, what does this mean? So, there's different translations of the Heart Sutra, right? In the next line, what do you guys have? Therefore all phenomena are emptiness. Therefore all phenomena are empty. Huh? What translation are you using? Without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain. Not deficient, not fulfilled. Okay? So, in that, there's other commentaries that say in that way, all phenomena. So stainless and not stainless. So it's either stainless and not stainless, or stainless and not without stain. And he's saying that it is more meaningful. It is clear that it is more meaningful if it is explained in accordance with the two negative terms appearing in succession. So, why is that? Okay, so first of all, the Tibetan, right? Let's take a look. So, yeah, Trima Mepa means stainless. Okay? Trima Dandrawa Mepa. Okay? So, like, Trima is stain. Mepa is like, it's a negating word. Like, well, here in English they say less. Trima is stain, Mepa is less. Okay? But Trima Dandrawa, so something to be like, Drawa is like free from. Right? Free from. So, Trima Dandrawa Mepa, it's, I would maybe say, yeah, not free from stains. Okay? So, Dandrawa is a negating word, and Mepa is also a negating word. So, Tenzin Namjong is saying, it is clear that it is more meaningful if it is translated like this. Trima Mepa, Trima Dandrawa Mepa. Okay? Now, let me look at then what the other translation would be. It probably would be not stainless. By the way, maybe one of you can look at the Sanskrit and see what's going on there. Huh? Yes?
Heart Sutra.
Okay, so here. Trima Mepa, Trima Dandrawa. Okay. Ale, okay. So here, the one translation would be Trima Mepa, and then Trima Dandrawa. Okay? So it would be stainless and free from stains. But the preferred translation is Trima Mepa, Trima Dandrawa Mepa. Double negation. You understand? Really? Well, no. Okay, well, this is what we have to understand. Okay? You guys understand? This is, so who has found the Sanskrit?
Amala na Vimala.
Okay, so what is that?
Amala, Mala is stained.
Yeah.
So Amala is stainless.
Yeah.
Now Vimala, I don't know exactly how Vimala is double negation.
Okay. Alright.
There's a na Vimala is there. Vimal means
Na Vimala.
Vimal means like pure, right?
Pure.
So now Vimala means not pure.
Okay. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. Actually, I'm not any kind of scholar. But let's then just look at the Tibetan. We have two translations. Okay? One is Trima is stain. Mepa is, not existent, or a negating word. Trima Dandrawa is like free from stains. So the first would be, I know this says something else, but it's like, stains not existing and free from stains. Okay? So then Tenzin Namjong is preferring stains not existing and free from stains also not existing. And he prefers that. So why?
Because neither is, it's not inherently existing. Things are not pure, things are also not impure. Inherently.
Yes. Okay, not that. I think that is driving at it. Okay? So, the stains don't inherently exist. But the freedom from stains also doesn't inherently exist. Okay? So what it means actually to abandon the stains, we say that like the true cessation is like, when you attain the whatever object of abandonment, if you're that dandrawa is what it means to have abandoned it. You understand? So the objects of abandonment of the path of seeing, okay, then when you achieve the path of release, you've achieved the state of that abandonment, dandrawa. You understand? Freedom from that object of abandonment. That's how they refer to it. Okay? But that being free from that object of abandonment also doesn't inherently exist. Okay? Alright. With regard to the second, the mode of meditation on the path of meditation, in both the commentary of Vilamamitra and the oral tradition of Bodhichitta, it is explained in terms of the resulting translation. Therefore, at that time, in emptiness there is no form, and so forth. In some commentaries, it is explained with the resultant translation, thus, emptiness is not form. Okay. So here, Tenzin Namjong is going through different translations. I want to just double check that the translation that he prefers is what we're using. Okay? So, Deta Deta wena dese tompanila zume. Okay? So what does it say? Ale. So we're not using that one. Deta wena dese tompanila zume. Joa gashile deta wen mane. Deta na tompani ni zumayins. Huh. So what we have here is neither of the two. But anyway, he then says, there is not a great difference in meaning. The supreme scholar, Jayam Gawe Lodre, explains that in emptiness there is no form and so forth, means that form and so forth do not exist in the sight of the meditative equipoise on the path of meditation. Okay? So, you guys understand? In emptiness there is no form. Okay? So what that actually, the scholar Jayam Gawe Lodre explains that means in the sight of meditative equipoise on the path of meditation there is no form. Okay? So this actually is kind of echoing what I was saying before with the reason and consciousness analyzing the ultimate, right? The reason and consciousness analyzing the ultimate does not find form. If it looks for form, it doesn't find it. The non-findability of form in the view of the reason and consciousness analyzing the ultimate is its emptiness. Right? So, here, you know, I would go for, you know, even further and say, in general, see, not only in the meditative equipoise on the path of meditation, but in any consciousness that realizes emptiness, there is no form. Not just on the path of meditation.
Any consciousness
That realizes emptiness, there is no form. Why not? Because form is a conventional truth. Right? And, well, yeah, let's just leave it at that, okay? Vimala Mitra has this in mind in his commentary when he says, in the perception of emptiness, there is no perception of form. Okay? That's good. When you perceive emptiness, you're not perceiving form. Why? Because emptiness is what we call a non-affirming negation. Right? So you can't have, well, for a sentient being, you're not going to have the, right? One, if it is a mere negation of true existence, no drupa. What is a drupa? Gakpa and drupa. Gakpa is a, what is it? Negation, and a drupa, positive phenomena, I think they call it. Okay? You guys understand? Yes? We talked about this many times. The Gakpa has, the negation has a affirming negation and a non-affirming negation. An affirming negation, both negations will refute its object of negation. A non-affirming negation then, an affirming negation then, through the force of refuting the object of negation, will imply another positive phenomena in its place. Right? So, the famous one, fat Devadatta doesn't eat at night. Doesn't eat during the day. That negates him eating during the day, but it implies him eating at night. A positive phenomenon. Why? Because you're calling him fat. It's not body shaming, okay? It's just the way it is. Okay? But inherent existence, there's no inherent existence It's also a negative, negation. What does it negate? Inherent existence, but it doesn't imply anything in its place. So emptiness is a non-affirming negation. So if you are, just having a non-affirming negation, since form is a positive phenomena, then that mind in a sentient being that is realizing it, that's true in this case for a form, right? It could not realize form and emptiness in one mind. Okay? In the perception of emptiness, there is no form. There is no perception of form. Thus, the non-appearance of the five aggregates to the sight of the meditative ego poise is there is no form, there is no consciousness, and so on. The non-appearances of the 12 sources is no I, no phenomena. The non-appearance of the 18 elements is no I constituent, no mental conscious element. The non-appearance of the thoroughly afflicted and completely pure dependent arising is no ignorance up to including no extinction of aging and death. The non-appearance of the object of observation is no suffering, no path. The non-appearance of the observer is no exalted wisdom. The non-appearance of any attainment or non-attainment of the fruition is no attainment and also no non-attainment. In that way, the 12 sources and 18 constituents should be taken as substrata. Okay. So now what we have here is basically, right, in the view of a mind realizing emptiness, you have no conventional phenomena that are directly appearing. And so in the sutra, these lists, there's no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no contingent factors, and so forth, are just various categorizations of conventional phenomena. Okay? And none of those conventional phenomena, they don't appear. There's a slight problem, because we say at Seta J that, for example, the uninterrupted path of seeing realizes the uninterrupted path of seeing. Okay? It's a little bit of a problem because the uninterrupted path of seeing is a conventional phenomenon, right? But what we say is, it doesn't realize it directly, it realizes it implicitly. Okay? So for a direct realization of emptiness, it doesn't realize directly any conventional phenomena, but it could realize conventional phenomena implicitly. Okay? Now, this is a kind of a big can of worms, but let me just say this, okay? If we realize this coffee cup today, then tomorrow we remember two things: the coffee cup and the fact that we've realized it, right? That's how we can remember. So there's no, you can't, even a wrong view, right? Even if you think today, oh, I believe the cup is truly existent, tomorrow you'll remember that you believed in true existence. Okay? So you have the memory of the object and of you kind of experiencing that object, whatever it is. Right? Okay. So we would then say, see, this, for that memory to work, you'll have to have realized it in the past. Otherwise, how can you remember something that you've never realized that day? Right? So we would then say, the person, when they get up from the uninterrupted path of seeing, they know that they've, they have realized emptiness directly. Right? So how does that happen? They have to then have a mind that has realized the uninterrupted path of seeing. So what is that? The uninterrupted path of seeing realizes itself implicitly, in an indirect way. Okay? If you understand that, great. If not, okay? So, okay. So in that way, the 12 sources and 18 constituents should be seen as substrata. So substrata here is in Tibetan keji. Okay? So here again, as we mentioned before, we cannot talk about the emptiness of something without talking about its substrata. What we also talk about is, there's the basis of emptiness. Okay? The basis of emptiness. So what the emptiness of the lid is the non-inherent existence of the lid. The lack of inherent existence of the lid. And what is the substrata for that emptiness? The lid. Okay? You can't have one without the other. Right? So that's what that means. So the 12 sources, 18 constituents, so forth. Those are substrata for emptiness. Okay? Now, regarding that, the non-Buddhist Samkhyas assert that what is called the self, the conscious Purusha, abides among the aggregates. They assert that apart from forms being seen and sounds being heard, through the sense powers such as the eye, there is no need for a separate eye consciousness that sees forms and that is other than the self. Kejub J, in his Derun Yigi Munsel, clearing away the mental darkness about the 7 works of Dhammakirti, that the section of the sutra described above is for the purpose of refuting that assertion that the self is found in the consciousness. So, must admit I'm not quite expert on the Samkhya school, but just the words here on the page, it says, and I'm not sure if this is true, I'm not sure if a Samkhya would agree with this, but it says that they assert that apart from forms being seen and sounds being heard through the sense powers such as the eye, there is no need for a separate eye consciousness that sees forms and that is other than the self. Okay? So, in the Buddhist presentation, we have an eye consciousness that sees a form. And then, because of that, we also say, I see a form. Right? And the eye consciousness is not the I. Right? Why isn't the eye consciousness the I? Sorry. E-Y-E consciousness is not the capital letter I, the self. Why not? What's that?
I is merely imputed on body and mind.
Yes? Go ahead.
It's like the EYE is just the sense.
Yeah.
The I may also include perception. Not perception. They're separate. The I and the I is completely different.
There are 3 lines and you include the meaning on those 3 lines.
There are other consciousness also, right? Which are subsumed in the I. When we say the I is the letter I, which is equivalent to this, in some way to the self,
Okay.
there would be other consciousness also.
Okay.
The I, the ear, whatever.
Yeah, you're driving it. I think the best of those three answers, right? So the self, right? If the I consciousness is the self, let's not talk capital letter I. Yeah. If the I consciousness is the self, then the ear consciousness would also be the self. The body consciousness would be the self. The tongue consciousness would be the self. Then we would have 5 eyes, 5 selves, if each of them were.
And the mental consciousness.
Yeah. Right? So then what Tenzin Namjong is saying about the Samkhyas is the Samkhyas would assert that apart from forms being seen, there is no need for a separate I consciousness that sees forms and that is other than the self. So, I'm not sure. Are there any Samkhya scholars here? The conception of self asserted by the and this will become a little bit clearer, I hope, in a minute. Okay. So the conception of self asserted by the non-Buddhists is an artificial conception of self. Okay? What does this mean? Remember, the artificial means intellectually acquired, is the other way to talk about it. Dagzin kunta, maribe kunta versus lenke. Okay? So, this conception of the self is an artificial conception, right? Means, unless you meet a Samkhya who then explains to you all this stuff, right? You wouldn't come to, this kind of belief on your own. Okay? The innate is the conception of a substantially existent person in the sense of self-sufficiency asserted by the Svachantikas and below. In that mode of conception, the self that serves as the basis of conception thinking I does not depend on or rely on the aggregates, but appears as the controller or master of the aggregates, and the aggregates appear as the control or servant of the self. This is demonstrated by the fact that when an individual conceives of my form and my feelings, what an individual conceives of as my form and my feelings appear to be things that an individual would be certainly be willing to give in exchange for those of others, if that were possible. Okay? This is what we have talked about before. I'm sure you guys remember. But, okay? We have this conception of an I that does not depend on or rely on the aggregates, but appears as the controller or master of the aggregates. Okay? How is this proved? As I mentioned in Dharmakirti's Pramanavartika, he gives you the thought experiment, right? If, someone were to come to you and say, would you trade your body for, I don't know, who do you like? The body of Brad Pitt, right? And would you trade your mind for the omniscient mind of Manjushri, right? Or, I don't know, who do you guys like? The women?
Ara.
Huh? No. In a worldly way. Huh? Sharon? Sharon Sandberg. Oh, no. We want someone like, you know, Katrina Cave for someone. You know, someone. Oh no, mind. No. You would, even the women, you can have the mind of Manjushri, no problem. Right? Talking about the body. Okay? I don't know. Think of this experiment. Okay. Yes. Is she the Oppo one? Oppo camera phones? Who's the one who's doing that advertising? Oh, I always get them mixed up. Anyway, one of those, okay? If you can trade. The fact that that can even make sense to us, right, shows that there's an innate feeling that there is an I that somehow owns or controls the body and mind, and it would then be willing to trade. Right?
Isn't this a foolish fantasy?
Yes. It's impossible. So, that's the point, Subhashini. But the fact that we can conceive of it is kind of proof that there is this innate conception of the independent I that is the controller. Right? The fact that we can even entertain it as a thought. Yes? The reasoning employed by the non-Buddhists to prove the existence of a substantially existent self of persons is: the subject, the mind, thinking I, operates correctly because it operates naturally upon seeing the aggregates without the mind being previously directed, as is the case, for example, with the apprehension of blue. Okay? So, remember, in 2 paragraphs up, it's talking about the Samkhyas who say there is no I consciousness separate from the self. Okay? Other than the self. And what do they say? The proof of that is the subject, the mind, thinking I, operates correctly because it operates naturally upon seeing the aggregates without the mind being previously directed, as is, for example, with the apprehension of blue. That is, the non-Buddhists argue that the self exists because the conception of it is intuitive. The mind automatically and naturally thinks I upon seeing the body, just as the mind thinks blue upon perceiving a patch of blue. Okay? So, you know, we see our body and we think I, right? Or you punch my body and I think you hit me. And that is a very natural conception, right? It happens naturally without having to be taught. Okay? And they then use that as proof that then the I exists naturally. Yeah?
They are therefore differing from the Buddhists in terms of the conception of the ultimate reality and conventional reality. Because they don't find a difference in that.
Yes, you can say that. The reasoning that Buddhists use, okay, you understand? You understand? The reasoning that Buddhists use to refute the existence of a substantially existent person is the subject, a self-sufficient person that is not imputed to either the collection or the continuum of the aggregates, does not inherently exist because of not being either the same as or different from the aggregates, as is the case, for example, with the horns of a rabbit. Huh?
No, sorry. The question.
Okay, we have talked about this before. This is the reasoning of lack of inherent oneness or difference, which is used in the four essentials, right? Remember? Okay. So basically, just how it works. If something is existent, it has to be either the same with or different from the pen or the pencil. Okay? So what is one or the same as the pen? The pen. Then Wangdu is different from the pen. But the horns of a rabbit is not different from the pen because the horns of a rabbit don't exist. Okay? So if something exists, it has to be either one with or different from the pen. It has to be one with or different from the aggregates. Or any other existent phenomena, right? You can say, if something exists, it has to be one with or different from the cup. One with or different from the book. One with or different from Wangdu. Okay? If something exists. The only thing that is, the same with, the cup, is this cup. This other cup is not the same as this cup. It's different from this cup. Okay? You with me? So then, the self-sufficient person that is not imputed to either the collection or the continuum of the aggregates does not inherently exist because of not being either the same as or different from the aggregates. So there's a little differences in how this reasoning is presented, because sometimes you'll see like the subject is not inherently existent because of not being inherently one or inherently different. This is just saying not being one or different from the aggregates. Okay? See, actually in this case, okay, we'll arrive at that in a minute, okay? So then there's a quam. See? Quam. This is not a correct reason because that which is stated as the subject does not exist. Okay. So, my experienced students, what are the features of any valid syllogism? Okay, I don't want to ask. Huh? We have the subject, the predicate, and the probandum, and the sign. Okay? So let's forget about this one for a moment. Sound, the subject sound is impermanent because of being a produced phenomena. Subject, sound. The jupche che, or the probandum, I think they translate it as, impermanent. Then the sign, or reason, ta, is the impermanence. Sorry. Produced phenomena. Okay? Alright. So now, in general, for something to be a valid reason, one, the subject has to be the sign, and whatever is the sign necessarily has to be the probandum. Okay? So in this case, sound is impermanent because of being a produced phenomena. For that to work, those things have to happen, right? So if we say, for example, sound is impermanent because of being Barack Obama. Is that a valid sign? No, because sound isn't Barack Obama. right? Whatever is Barack Obama is impermanent, but since the subject isn't the sign, it's not a valid reason. If we say that sound is impermanent because of being an existent thing, that's also not a valid reason. Why? Because if something is an existent thing, it doesn't necessarily have to be an impermanent phenomena. Why not? Emptiness is an existent thing, but is not impermanent. Okay? Okay. So now, the qualm is coming up because here, this reasoning, what is a subject? Self-existent, substantially existent person. That's the subject. Does that exist? No. It doesn't exist. So then, it's a little bit technical, but in general, there is this debate like, okay, for something to be a correct sign, it has to exist. Okay? So for example, the horns of a rabbit, okay, that might get complicated. Okay. In general, right, the person for whom that is becoming a correct reason has to realize those parts individually, right? Okay? So for example, sound is impermanent because it's a produced phenomena. That person for whom that's going to become a correct sign for, right? That person necessarily does not realize that sound is impermanent. But they realize sound, impermanence, and produced phenomena, each individually. They also realize that whatever is a produced phenomena is necessarily impermanent. They realize that whatever is not impermanent is necessarily not produced. Okay? They realize that sound is produced, and they're interested to find out whether it's impermanent or not. Okay? That type of person, then you state that reason to, and very quickly they get the realization of sound being impermanent. Okay? But they have to have all those other reasons. Okay? So now the question comes, well, in the same way, right, the self-sufficient, substantially existent person is not inherently existent because of not being one or different from the aggregates. Then they have to have all those similar realizations. So they have to realize the subject. But what is the subject? A non-existent. Can someone realize a non-existent? No. Because what it means to exist is being realized by a valid cognition. There is no mind that realizes the horns of a rabbit. There is no mind that realizes a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. So this qualm comes up. This can't be a correct reason because that which is stated as a subject does not exist. Okay? So here, the answer. There's no fault. If the accumulated meaning, that is the opposite of the composite of the two, a basal subject, and the predicate of the probandum, is refuted by a valid cognition, then the reason is not correct. But if the accumulated meaning, that is the composite of the two, a mere subject, and the predicate of the probandum, is eliminated with valid cognition, the fault of an incorrect reason is not entailed because, in a syllogism that states a non-affirming negatives as both the sign and the predicate of the probandum, is suitable to have a non-existent as a subject. Okay. So, let's take this step by step. Okay? Not inherently existent is the probandum. Right? Okay, here they're calling it predicate. Predicate of the probandum. The sign is not being one or different from the aggregates. Both of those are non-affirming negations. Do you see that? Right? Not one with or separate from the aggregates is a non-affirming negation. It refutes oneness and separateness from the aggregates, but it doesn't imply anything in its place. And not being inherently existent is also a non-affirming negation. It refutes inherent existence, but does not imply anything in its place. So here what he's saying is, if the predicate of the probandum and the sign are non-affirming negations, then you can have a non-existent as the subject. Okay? So the rest of it, let me look at the Tibetan again. Okay. So, if we have the subject, okay, so let's say it like this. The subject, sound, is impermanent because of being a produced phenomena. Okay, that's a valid sign. So we have the subject and the predicate, the composite of the two. In that case would be sound is impermanent. Okay? So if we said, on the other hand, sound is permanent because of being a produced phenomena, okay? Then the composite of the two, the subject and the predicate of the probandum, would be refuted by valid cognition. Right? If that's the case, then the reason is not correct. Okay? You understand? Right? So, So actually what we have here, right, is there's this basal subject, Rang Tengi Chichen, and the mere subject, Chichen Bashikpa. Okay? So, although the horns of a rabbit don't exist, okay, you can have what is called the Dunchi, or the meaning generality of the horns of a rabbit, right? It can appear to your mind, right? In the same way, the inherently or the self-sufficient, substantially existent person does not exist, but you can have an appearance of it to your mind. right? Okay? So, at least in the Sarah J textbooks, what we talk about might be driving at the same point as Tendal Rampa here. You have the Kutsu Chichen and the Songsu Chichen, right? Kutsu is like the way that it is uttered, or the way that it is stated. And then the Songsu is what then appears to the mind. Okay? So here in this case, what is stated is the self-sufficient, substantially existent person, but what appears to the mind is the meaning generality of it. The meaning generality of the self-sufficient, substantially existent person exists. Okay? So anyway, the point is, and we agree with this, if the predicate of the provandum and the sign are non-affirming negations, then you can have a non-existent as the stated subject. Okay? Now, what's going on here, right? The self-sufficient, substantially existent person doesn't exist, but its lack of inherent existence exists. You understand? Yes. The self-sufficient, substantially existent person does not exist, but its, well, one, its lack of existence exists, and two, its lack of inherent existence also exists. Why? Because it can be realized. An elephant doesn't exist in the room, but the non-existence of elephant in the room exists. The non-existence of elephant in this room exists. Why? Because we all realize it. Right? For something to exist, it just means being established by valid cognition. Right? Okay? So, in that case, if we're using, non-affirming negations for both the predicate of the provandum and the sign, okay? The self-sufficient, substantially existent person, right, doesn't exist. But its lack of inherent existence, as well as its not being one or different from the aggregates, that also exists.
Non-affirmative.
Ah.
Non-affirmative, that is what it is. Right, like what you just spoke of.
The sign is a non-affirming negation. The predicate of the provandum is a non-affirming negation. What I'm saying is, the self-sufficient, substantially existent person doesn't exist. But its lack of inherent existence exists. And it not being one with or different from the aggregates also exists. Is the self-sufficient, substantially existent person one with the aggregates? No. What is the only thing that's one with the aggregates? The aggregates. Is the self-sufficient, substantially existent person the aggregates? No. Why not? It doesn't exist. Does the self-sufficient, substantially existent person exist? No. But it being different from the aggregates, it not being different from the aggregates, does that exist? Yes. Okay? So, although the self-sufficient, substantially existent person does not exist, it not being one with or different from the aggregates exists. It can be realized. and therefore it's a correct sign. Okay? Okay, so this is what I was talking about. Thus, the subject of the syllogism, a self-sufficient person who is not imputed to the collection or continuum of the aggregates is called a mere or stated subject. Okay? Kutsugita, or kutsugi any, or chichen bashikpa. Yeah? Right? That doesn't exist. Okay? But the meaning of the term self-sufficient person, that is, the appearance of the self-sufficient person to the thought that is the basal subject or the imputed, is the basal subject or imputed subject of that syllogism. Okay? The actual basis of refutation of permanence and the proof of impermanence with respect to sound being the sign of being a product, by the sign of being a product, is the appearance of the opposite from non-sound to thought. At that time, sound itself is not appearing to thought directly, just as it is. However, I wonder whether there is a fine point that the appearance of opposite from non-sound is not the basal subject in that proof. Wow. Okay, there's a footnote there, so let's take a look. It just says, for a discussion on the use of basal subjects and mere subjects in syllogism, see Donald Lopez Jr., A Study of Sajantika, published in Ithaca, New York, by Stone Line Publications, 1987, pages 174 to 179. So, oh, and this book is published or written by Donald Lopez, so he's advertising himself. It's okay, I do that too. I always say, look at our YouTube channel. Right? Okay. See, these points are actually quite technical in the points of logic. Okay? But, see, it's a bit strange because if I didn't tell you about it, if I just said the proof, you know, the substantially existent person is not inherently existent because of not being one with or different from the aggregates. Did any of you think, oh, wait a minute, that's not a valid sign because the subject doesn't exist? Did any of you think that? No way. Okay. So then we have to we create a doubt that didn't exist in your mind and would only exist in the mind of someone who has, you know, studied a bit of Pramanavartika or logic to begin with, right? Right? So,
for the schools who believe in self-sufficiently existing self, this is a valid syllogism. Without any analysis.
So, no, they wouldn't.
In their school, that subject will exist. It's an existing
Yeah. So, okay. Now here's the thing, right? The self-sufficient substantially existent person does not exist. Okay. And he's asking, in the schools that believe that it does exist, Okay? Would this be a correct syllogism? Huh?
Doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. But for the schools that believe it does exist, would it be a correct syllogism?
Yes.
Yes. Could this be differently?
So, who is, well, first of all, we have to first inquire, which school would hold that that subject exists?
Non-Buddhist schools.
Non-Buddhist schools, right?
Which paragraph says that?
Ah. Yeah. Well, okay, let's go with this one more paragraph. Let me press pause on that. Because it seems that, right, for everyone except the prasangikas that I know of, right, for something to exist, it has to inherently exist. Right? Right? I don't know about all of the non-Buddhist schools. Right? But if it is a school that asserts that if something exists, it has to inherently exist, then this would not be a correct syllogism. Because it's saying the self-sufficient and substantially existent person does not inherently exist. Right? So if for them it exists, and existing entails inherent existing, then there could be no sign that establishes the the non-inherent existence of the self-sufficient, substantially existent person. You see that?
Yeah, the reason is not there.
If sound is sound is impermanent, right? So there's no proof. There can be no valid sign proving its permanence. Right? In the same way, yeah? You understand? See, this is what it was saying with the composite of the two, the subject and the predicate of the provandum. The composite of the two. Sound is impermanent because it's produced phenomena. The composite of those two is sound is impermanent. Okay? So the composite of the two have to exist. Okay? So here, the self-sufficient, substantially existent person, if that exists, right, then the composite of the two would necessarily not exist. And therefore there can be no proof of that. Because it doesn't exist. The composite of the two.
And the reason is also not right.
Well, if the self-sufficient, substantially existent person were to exist, it would be either one with or different from the aggregates. It would be different from the aggregates. Those schools that assert the self-sufficient, substantially existent person, that's what it means, right? It's a type of self that is separate from, different from the aggregates, yet controls them. So I think they would assert that the sign exists on the basis of the subject. Okay? So let me go through one more paragraph and then we'll finish. Furthermore, not only do the non-Buddhists just assert substantial existence in the sense of self-sufficiency, it is clear that the Sautrantikas and Chittamatrins assert that gross form and consciousness are substantially existent in the sense of self-sufficiency, because those proponents of true existence assert that if something is imputedly existent, it is imputed to a basis of designation that is substantially existent in the sense of self-sufficiency. How can one know this? It is proven by what is said by Tsongkhapa in his Gompa-Rapso, Illumination of the Thought. The others, the non-Prasangika Buddhist schools, assert that things are imputedly existent, assert that things that are imputedly existent are imputed in dependence on a basis of designation that is substantially existent in the sense of self-sufficiency. Because this passage is very clear, it does not need to be twisted to determine its meaning. With regard to the subtle selflessness of a person in terms of consciousness and gross form, in the systems of the proponents of true existence, the non-Prasangika schools, the non-existence of consciousness as an object of use by a person who is substantially existent in the sense of self-sufficiency is posited as the selflessness of a person of consciousness. The other can be inferred. Okay. This is a bit tough. But let's just say this, right? The Sautrantikas and Chittamatras, okay? They believe the person is imputedly existent. The person is imputedly existent means the person, okay, what for them it means to be imputedly existent, in this case, is that for the person to appear to the mind, it necessarily depends on other phenomena. Rani loy yul du chawala chishen loy yul du chawa chargupa. Okay? So for that phenomenon to appear to the mind, it necessarily depends on another phenomenon appearing to the mind. Okay, so, Subhashini is imputedly existent because for Subhashini to appear to our minds, another phenomena means Subhashini's aggregates, either her body or her mind, have to then appear to us. Right? That's what it means for it to be imputedly existent. Okay? But what they then assert is that basis of designation, those aggregates, the body and mind, are then substantially existent. Right? Because, like for example, the body. For the body to appear to the mind, does another phenomena have to appear to the mind? Well then, some argue, well yes, because the arms, the torso, the legs appear. But that is not, what is the word they use? It's not other, right? Okay? The arms, legs, and so forth are not other than the body. Okay? So, although for the body to appear, its parts appear, those parts are not other than the body. Therefore, there's no fault. So, in any case, even an imputed phenomena, like the person, they say it's imputed. But it's not merely imputed. Okay, we were talking about that last night, the difference between being imputed and being merely imputed. Something to be merely imputed means that it doesn't exist at all from its own side. Okay? But the lower schools believe that it's imputed. Imputed because for it to appear to the mind, another phenomenon appears to the mind. Okay? So, then this last sentence, with regard to subtle selfness of a person in terms of consciousness and gross form in the systems of the proponents of true existence, the non-existence of consciousness as an object of use by a person who is substantially existent in the sense of self-sufficiency is posited as the selflessness of a person of consciousness. Okay? Alright. So what does this mean? This is in contradistinction to the Prasangika school. The Prasangika school, what would they... okay. For the Prasangika school, the object of negation for persons as well as phenomena is the same. What is that object of negation? True existence, inherent existence. Okay? For the lower schools, they say that what is refuted by the selflessness of person is the self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Right? But they would then say, okay, is the consciousness, right? Okay, there are certain statements that say that the substance of person and the substance of phenomena exist on the basis of all phenomena. Okay? So the consciousness or a form is a form lacking in the substance of person, or does it have the substance of person? It would be, okay, it would lack the substance of person. But what then does that mean? The form then is not the object of use of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. That's what it means for the form to be, the selflessness of person of form. That again is yeah, that's what that means. Okay? So what's the point, right? See, if it just were the case, okay, this is now according to the lower schools, okay? So a form is not a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, right? But that's relatively easy to realize, that the form is not a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. Because it's easy to realize that the form is not the person. So if you realize that the form is not the person, then you'd realize that the form is not the self-sufficient, substantially existent person, right? If you realize the lid is not a person, you'd realize it's not an American person. You would realize it's not an Indian person, right? Okay? So for them, there's what the point of this is in the Sochika school, realizing, or the lower schools, realizing the substance of the person is not a trivial accomplishment, right? Okay? So then to say, oh, but it is a trivial accomplishment because we realize that the lid is, not a self-sufficient, substantially existent person, they say, well, that's not the meaning of what it is to be, for the cup to be, selfless as a person, or the lid. What that is, you have to realize that the lid is not an object of use of a self-sufficient, substantially existent person. To realize that, you have to realize that the self-sufficient, substantially existent person itself doesn't exist. That self-realization is, comes before, right? You have to realize that the self-sufficient essentially existent person does not exist. Then you know that the lid is not an object of use by it, right? So that's the point. You guys understand? Yes? Okay. Are there any questions? This is my opinion, okay? So, in the Tibetan monastic curriculum, we study the Abhisamayalankara, which is the commentary on the hidden meaning of the Prajnapanamita Sutras. Okay? That's explicitly in our curriculum. The Heart Sutra is not in our curriculum. So now, then when Tendala Rampa, he writes this commentary on the Heart Sutra in whatever, 16 pages. His intended audience is someone who has studied the Abhisamayalankara. We studied it for 7 years. Okay? So then someone who studied it for that long, and also has been studying Pramanavartika, the Dura, other topics, then, you read that, and then you're like, okay, I know what he's talking about. But for you guys, it's a little bit like that. So some of it, yeah, is just what I was saying. This would not be a doubt for you if you haven't studied already a lot. Quite a lot. Okay? So I hope I have at least, given you the proper context to understand what the heck they're talking about with some of these doubts.
Thank you, Venerable.
No. Okay? Okay, so let's leave it at that. Thank you very much. Let us dedicate the merit. So due to the merit accumulated by myself, all the other Buddhist Bodhisattvas, and all the listening beings, may the altruistic wish to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings rise in my mind and the minds of all sentient beings without even a second's delay. May the altruistic wish that has already been generated increase. We dedicate all these merits accumulated by ourselves and others over 3 times for the long lives of the spiritual friends, for the flourishing of the holy Dharma, particularly all the activities of Ling, as well as all the activities of our holy gurus. May they receive every single required condition and have all the obstacles removed so they can be successful in benefiting sentient beings. Then we dedicate for all the beings who are sick, all the beings who recently died, may they attain enlightenment, and then also for there to be no war, terrorist attacks, natural disasters, or any undesirable thing in this or any world system of the 10 directions from now until the end of samsara.